The Cincinnati Reds got themselves a good one in Jeimer Candelario, and we are going to look at just what he brings to the table for the Reds in 2024. I know he was a very unexpected signing, but this roster is so much better with him, and we are going to tell you why on today's Locked On Reds.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily source for all things Cincinnati Reds. I'm Stephen Offenbaker, and he's Jeff Carr, and we love baseball. We love these Cincinnati Reds. We have taken that love of the game. We have taken that love for the Cincinnati Reds, and we have turned it into information for you. Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And on today's live Aloha Friday on a Thursday edition of the Locked On Reds podcast, we are going to be taking a look at what Jeimer Candelario brings to the Reds for 2024 and beyond. We're also going to dig into the new rules changes that were announced moments ago by Major League Baseball. We're also going to dig into your questions and comments on today's live show. There is a lot of ground to cover, and we are excited to do it. Before we get into any of that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets back with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 back in bonus bets if your team wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And Jeff, where we're going to get started today is talking about Jeimer Candelario. Now, when this signing went down, it caught us all by surprise. We were all hung up on they need an outfielder, they need a starting pitcher, and of course they go and get an infielder. And everybody had a little glitch for a minute when that happened, and we kind of all pushed the what is Nick Krall doing button. And now that there's been some time for it to set, and we looked at it, and we spent a lot of time earlier today looking at what this Reds roster could look like, looking at what the Reds batting order, the lineup could look like day to day. And it turns out that he fits kind of nicely when everybody's healthy and 100%. And if just one person is not healthy and 100%, well, having him around is a tremendous advantage, I think, for the Reds now as we get closer and closer and closer to spring training 2024.
Yeah, and we've talked quite a bit about how the roster moves with him on it. What we really wanted to do today is kind of focus on who he is as a player, talk about his profile, and really what is his strength. And the good news is his strength is bringing in the runs. Dude can absolutely drive in runs. His batting is kind of his calling card. He's fine defensively. He's not going to hurt you, but he's not going to contend for any kind of Gold Glove. He's not really that fast on the base paths. He's not going to be a guy that we're talking about getting 20 steals or 15 steals, or I don't even think he's going to get like 10. He's going to be fine on the base paths, but he's not fast. What he does is hit, and he hits really well. We start off with this because, I mean, you can see the batting average, you can see the on base and all this other stuff. The thing that really excites me about him, and it's something that I've seen a couple of people comparing to a beloved former Red, and not necessarily in the same vein, but he gives you the kind of feeling of Nick Castellanos because he hits line drives. In fact, for his career, Jeimer Candelario actually has a higher percentage of line drives than he does fly balls. He's very good at driving the ball into all parts of the field. He's not just a, straight pool guy or something like that. He is very good at kind of putting him in the good spots, putting him in the gaps, and driving in multiple runs and extra bases and all that good stuff. So he is going to profile very well in the fifth, sixth spot in this lineup. And this was a great ad simply just by looking at him in a vacuum.
I agree with you. Listen, I like this signing the more and more I look at it. Here's a couple things about him that really jump out at me. The fact that he's a switch hitter that really doesn't have a lot of drop off. If you look at his career numbers, there's a little bit of a separation in his splits, but looking at what he did last year with his good grief, can't talk today, Jeff, with his switch hitting, there's not a lot of variation. Batting average versus righties of 251, on base 333, slugging 479. He hit 16 home runs versus right-handed pitching. Versus the lefties, actually a better batting average at 254, a better on base percentage at 342. Now slugging dropped off a little bit. He was 451 for slugging and only hit 6 home runs, but a smaller amount of at bats. So there's not a lot of drop off there. I think a true switch hitter that you can count on being in the lineup every day, no matter who's going for the opposing team. And I think, we talked about this a little bit earlier today, that brings some stability to this lineup where guys can kind of just show up and know, at least for the most part, what they're going to be doing, where they're going to be batting, not necessarily what position they're going to be playing. I think that will change from day to day, but that batting order has the makings of a stable, not the same lineup every day, but close, that will give everybody a little bit of comfort, I think.
And I think he kind of falls into the consistent producer category, kind of the Spencer Steer category. We talked about Spencer Steer kind of being an unsung hero. I don't necessarily know that there's going to be a lot of episodes where we are just standing up on a table going crazy over something that Jeimer Candelario just did. But I think that what he's going to do is be a consistent bat in the middle of this lineup that you're not going to look at and says there's any clear weaknesses. We're not going to be super worried about him. He does struggle a little bit against breaking balls, but he understands that, and he's a pretty solid plate discipline guy. He's right there around league average when it comes to strikeout percentage, so you're not adding another strikeout machine. I mean, that's something that we have kind of complained about some of these young guys, but we know that they will improve on. Jeimer Candelario does not add to that problem. He's right there where you want him to be. So when you add all of that together, you come up with a really consistent hitter. And I think that's been the theme of this offseason. We talked a lot about the starting pitcher that we want the Reds to add. We want a consistent arm that's going to be there for 30 starts. Well, this is like the position player version of that. Jeimer Candelario is the kind of guy that I think is going to be there when the Reds need him to be. And that is really the number one thing with us. Plus, and we've buried the lead with this, Jeimer Candelario was actually rated by MLB.com as the 13th best free agent in this class. And that's including pitchers. That's just overall 13th best player in the free agent market. The Reds went and got a top 15 guy, Steve. I mean, we got to be pretty happy about that.
No, I completely agree with that. And we don't normally jump to the questions and comments this early in the show, but I'm gonna for this Candelario conversation. Jared says, don't get me wrong. I like the Candelario signing, but I see his 2022 statistics and it gives me a little something to worry about. Can you guys make me feel better and say that it was a fluke? Well, this is what I know. In 2023, he was a 2.9 WAR guy. And in his career, he's already amassed 10.3 in WAR. That tells me he's consistently putting up WAR every year. Even though 2022 numbers may not excite you, I think over the duration of his contract in Cincinnati, he will continue to be around 2.5 to 3.5 in WAR. And that's a guy that I want to have on the team.
Well, and if you're going to zero in on 2022, let me even take it a step further and say 2021, according to FanGraphs, he was a 3.8 WAR guy, almost a 4-win player. You're talking all-star level kind of performances at that point. So in 2021 and 2023 combined, he was almost at 7 wins above replacement in those 2 seasons. So yes, 2022 looks a little bit rough, but when you add in the 2 seasons that kind of sandwich that together, he looked fine. And I think that's who he's going to be. We're probably looking at a 2.5 to 3 win guy. And that's a great add for this Reds team. I think too that when we initially saw this signing, we immediately thought, boy, he's going to be pushing somebody, right? He's going to be blocking somebody. Somebody's not going to get playing time now because of this. The idea is to win ball games. At the end of the day, does Jeimer Candelario make this team a playoff team by himself? No. But when you put him all into the category, when you put him all into this roster and you categorize different players as to how they're going to help this team, this is a huge add for Nick Krall, adding to the depth of the position side where we're really, I mean, that depth was tested last year. Even though we got the really awesome rookies and stuff like that early on in the season, we saw that when you don't have those guys in the lineup, you got the Kevin Newmans of the world. I'd much rather have Jeimer Candelario in the lineup than Kevin Newman.
And let's not forget that it does create a scenario where there is now some flexibility for Nick Krall to make a deal to bring in that pitcher that the Reds lack, or to make a trade deadline move and utilize some of the depth to bring something back that the Reds might need, be it an outfielder, be it a starting pitcher. We keep talking about this Jonathan India situation and won't they trade him? It at least creates the flexibility to do so. If you listen to the episode earlier today, and if you didn't, shame on you. Why haven't you? As soon as this is done, get over there, listen to that. But we drew up a potential lineup that really does kind of demonstrate how Jonathan India, while not being completely the odd man out, could be getting nudged towards the door a little bit. Right. You can kind of see that by looking at the roster and the lineups that we created. So this kind of does give that flexibility. It gives options. And I think in a 162 game season where you don't know what's going to happen, we've seen the injury bug bite time and time again. What the Reds needed more than anything else is flexibility and options, and it not be options of guys you've never heard of coming up from AAA, playing for a day, not being able to field a ground ball at third base. I'm looking at you, Motter, and then getting sent back down. So these are the kind of situations the Reds need to avoid. And I think this signing helps them do that in the long term, not just for 2024, but beyond. This is a multi-year deal.
Yeah, and I think that is really where the big picture of Jeimer Candelario is, and that's why we are so excited about him. Roster flexibility, and in a good way. We talked about this on today's episode earlier, in that platoons and all that other stuff. It kind of felt like David Bell had to platoon everybody because there were so many deficiencies. Now this lineup has so many strengths, and the roster has so many strengths that David Bell can draw from, and Jeimer Candelario is a big reason why this roster has a lot more strength. So I'm very excited that he is in the fold. Steve, right before we hit go live here today, like literally seconds before.
That's why the start time changed. We had to go read what the rules changes, right?
Like, wait a minute, what's this stuff? We got new rules, new rule changes, new rule tweaks, a couple of things that are changing for this next season that the MLB Competition Committee just confirmed. So we're going to dive into what those are coming up next. Before we talk about that, though, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, and that is FanDuel. Now is the best time because, baby, it's cold outside. But the deals continue to stay hot with FanDuel. They've got this amazing promo deal now. If you join and you place a $5 moneyline bet that wins, you're going to get $150 in bonus bets just for that $5 winning moneyline bet. You got to go try it right now. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and join in on the action. I love doing FanDuel so many different ways when you come into NFL, NBA, and you've got point spreads and player props. The same game parlay. If I just sit down and I turn on the television and I watch a game, you can put together a same game parlay, turn that game into a little bit of cash for you. So check it out at FanDuel.com/lockedon today. We looked at some futures, and we've been talking about this the last couple of days. The Reds, a couple of pitchers on the Cy Young odds list. They're pretty far down the list, obviously, for different reasons. But Hunter Green is up top with 40-1 odds to win the Cy Young Award. Then you've got Nick Lodolo and Andrew Abbott at 120-1 to win the Cy Young. I think I saw Graham Ashcraft. It was like 160-1 or something like that. But yeah, they're there. They have a shot. Could win a couple of bucks, though, if you place something on there. I mean, $1 get $120 if Nick Lodolo wins the Cy Young. So check that out today. It's at FanDuel.com/lockedon and join in on the action. Again, $5 money line bet that wins gets you $150 in bonus bets back. FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of the NFL and the official sportsbook of Locked On. Thanks as always for making Locked On Reds your first listen, your second listen every single day. Got a nice little bonus live Aloha Friday on a Thursday here today with you, as the holiday weekends messed up the schedule all, but we wanted to do some live Reds talk with you. And we were going to talk about, I'm sure we'll talk about some free agent options and some free agent ideas coming up here later on when you guys drive the ship. But right as we hit record, Jesse Rogers from ESPN tweeted out, new MLB Competition Committee approves changes for the 2024 season. And a couple of these are interesting because, last year the pitch clock was a rousing success. I know I loved it. I know Steve loved it. There was a little bit of, when you're at the ballpark, it kind of makes it like you feel like you miss a lot if you go get something to eat or something like that. But outside of that, it was a rousing success. They're shortening that with runners on base now. Instead of a 20-second pitch clock, there's now an 18-second pitch clock, which, by the way, also means that the batter has less time to, in between pitches and stuff like that. But still, 18-second pitch clock with runners on base. Now there's only 4 mound visits in a game instead of 5. If a pitcher, this one's we're going to unpack these a little bit more, but these last 2 I think we'll probably spend the most time on. If a pitcher starts to warm up before an inning, he must face at least 1 hitter. Now, if that also goes in with the other rule, if you face 1 hitter, you got to face 3. So why'd they put 1 hitter? Because you're going to have to face 3 if you come into the ballgame. Anyway, and then the runner's lane to first has been widened to the infield grass. Your first thoughts on these, Steve? Because, these are fresh. There's still kind of like trying to work around in my mind like, okay, interesting.
Let me try and process through a few of these, and I'm sure my thoughts will evolve as I have time to actually sit down and do a little analysis. But just gut reaction to some of these. One, I'll be very interested to hear what the pitchers think about even more time being shaved off, what they get to work with. I know there were complaints already about how this was causing more arm injuries, and they felt like they weren't getting time to recover between pitches and et cetera, et cetera. And now we're shaving 2 more seconds off with runners on. So I'll be interested to see how pitchers react to that. With the warm-up rule is an interesting one to me, because I wonder if, we've got the 3 batter minimum rule, but is the competition committee trying to backdoor in a rule for a loogie again? If you warm up the guy between innings and you've got a lefty that you want to just face that next lefty, because you warmed him up between innings, can he only face the 1 batter? I need an interpretation. I'm going to be looking to hear what their intention with this is, because if that's the intention, then I hate it. Then just get rid of the 3 batter minimum rule. I don't quite understand why this needed to be done. But then again, I don't understand half of what Major League Baseball does in the national arena of anything that they do. So that, to me, is a question that needs to be answered. And then finally, on the base running thing, I think that's an interesting one. It's not a huge change. This is basically going to allow batters to run anywhere in the dirt between home plate and first base. Fine. It does impact the catchers. It's going to mean if you feel a ground ball or a bunt right out in front of home plate, you're going to need to take an extra step into the infield fully before you make the throw to first base to avoid hitting the runner. So I think this is because more runners were getting hit. I don't have that data in front of me. Again, this just happened, but I feel like it's a response to that. And then obviously a catcher could always take a drop step and throw into foul territory down the first base line to avoid the runner as well. So it's going to require some changes to how the catcher plays that position. That's interesting. But a couple of these I don't understand. I don't know why they felt compelled to make these changes.
So you're taking it literally as in, if you put somebody in the bullpen, you warm them up in between innings or while your team is batting, then you are announcing to the other team he's coming in and he's pitching against 1 hitter the next inning. It's not, you don't think it's something where like the rule states, all right, if you start to warm the guy up, you got to bring him in. Well, now he is subject to the 3 batter minimum. So he's got to pitch for 3 batters. You think that if somebody is being warmed up before they're half the inning of pitching, they can use him as a loogie. They can only pitch him for 1 guy.
Well, and the question is, do they have to face the first batter of the inning, or do they have to face a batter in the inning? Because what if you want him to get the final? What if you're looking 3 hitters down the lineup and hoping that you get the first 2, and you want him to face that lefty? I don't know. I'm not sure. Again, this is breaking raw news, but I think it might be a little bit more nuanced than just here it is. I want to hear some explanation, which we will get, I'm sure, throughout the day. I'm just curious, what it means. When do they have to come into the game?
We know for certain, though. I mean, with Rob Manfred, nothing is black and white, and nothing is right there in front of you as we might think it to be. And it's interesting because I just saw that Jeff Passan tweeted Tony Clark, the director of the Players Association, his response to it, and basically Tony Clark in so many, in a paragraph said these are fixing problem, or these are solutions to that are in search of problems. There are no problems right now that these are fixing.
There you go.
So it's interesting to me. I don't know, like the runner rule. Like, to be honest with you, I don't know what that solves. I don't know that there were any issues with that. Like, was there a guy on the infield side of the of the foul line, but he was still in the dirt and he was called out for being? I've never seen that before. So I don't know what that solves. And then the warming up in between innings, because it feels like if you're just watching the course of a game, if a manager is bringing in a guy to warm up while somebody's hitting, that means that he's done with the pitcher who pitched this last inning. Like, I really have not seen too many examples of, say David Bell putting Ian Jabot up in the bullpen and the pitcher has just thrown 6 innings or something like that, so that he's warming up while the Reds are hitting, and then the Reds come back out that next inning and he leaves in the starter. Like, David Bell is very kind of like obvious with this. Like, if he is warming up a guy while the Reds are hitting, that guy's coming in to pitch. I don't know why we have to have a rule that states that guy has to now come in to pitch. It just seems like we're being Captain Obvious about that. That's a weird rule to me, the more that I think about it.
And, there are some sporadic examples throughout baseball where a starter appears to be done and then goes back in the dugout and lobbies his way to get to go back out. This would dampen that if the manager had already got somebody starting to warm up. I don't know. This one is very odd to me, Jeff. Of all of these that we've talked about, this one I think requires a little bit more explanation from Major League Baseball, and obviously it won't be a good explanation, but at least an explanation to try and figure out how they want this thing implemented. As far as the other ones, I really don't care about the whole base runner thing. Whatever, they run all over the place in the dirt anyway. I think it's just formalizing what the arrangement is anyway. With the shaving of the clock, it was fast enough for me. You said, you liked the pitch clock. I liked the pitch clock when I was watching games at home. I did not like the pitch clock as much when we were at the ballpark. It really limits your ability to go and do things between innings. And in fact, that's why you and I now hardly ever sit in our seats, right? We go post up at an area that's convenient to obtain the products that are available at the ballpark. Yes. Refreshments, we'll say. So, we don't sit on our seats anymore because of that. So for me, I don't want it to get a whole lot faster. I think if anything, they found the sweet spot, leave it alone. But, the baseball powers that be are opposed these days to just leaving it alone and letting it be. So
I just have to see more on this warming up. And Jared on Vinyl kind of says a thought that I also have in my mind sounds more like an injury concern rule for having pitchers warming up and calming down so much in the bullpen. There were definitely a lot of iterations of that with the Reds where it'd be like, Jabot got up in the 6th, then he got up in the 7th. Well, he's finally coming in the 8th. And we've talked with multiple people about, warming up is still part of a pitcher's regimen. It's not like he warms up and that's not taxing on his arm. That's still taxing on his arm. But I could see this being Rob Manfred saying, well, yes, this rule is player safety. But I don't really know that I don't really know that it solves that much, because you could still get a guy up while you're pitching multiple innings.
Again, we're reading this as it only applies if you warm a guy up while you're hitting, right? I mean, you can still get a guy warming up in inning while your guy's on the mound and then decide not to use him. That's how I'm reading it anyway. Again,
I agree.
This is just breaking news, folks. We're gonna spend more time talking about this when Major League Baseball has spoken whatever gibberish they're gonna speak. But for me, I just my gut reaction is I don't like it. I don't like shaving more time off. I don't like them to continue to complicate pitching changes. The mound visits, I don't know that we spent any time talking about the mound visits. They shaved the mound visits from 5 to 4. I guess it really doesn't matter all that much. Okay.
I don't know how much that helps, to be honest with you. Like, I think they did a good job by shaving it down to 5. And because, there were some games where it was just like, oh my God, will we throw a pitch? Stop going out to talk about it and just throw a pitch. But now it's like, okay, what's the difference between 5 and 4? Like, I don't get that at all. But those are the new rules. We will continue to discuss those as more come out. I'm interested to hear what you guys think about that. Let us know in the comments section down below, because we are about to move into the point of the show where you drive the ship.
Before we get into your questions and comments, I just want to take a minute and remind you that you can follow us between episodes. You can follow Jeff and I on X, Twitter X, whatever it's called these days. Are we still tweeting? Are we Xing? That sounds dirty. I don't know what we're doing, but you can follow us over there. You can follow Jeff at Jeff Carr. That's Jeff with 3 Fs. You can follow me at S Offenbaker. That's with 2 Fs. And you can follow the show at Locked On Reds. Also, if you haven't done so yet, get over to our Discord server community. Join in the conversation. We talk Reds. There's some extra channels for Bengals, for Off Topic, for breaking news, for bashing David Bell. Whatever you want to do, we got a spot for you to talk about it. So if you want to join us over there, the link will be in today's show description. Come join us. We want to talk baseball with you, and we want to talk baseball with you right now, because we're going to get into your questions and comments, and there have been a lot already in the chat section. I'm going to go back to the beginning to find it, because I do want to talk about this guy. But if you didn't watch today's earlier episode, we spent a lot of time talking about what the 13 player position group was going to look like, and a name that we did not mention during that conversation at all, Jeff, is Nick Martini. And Joshua asks, someone please tell me if Nick Martini is getting DH starter looks. I thought he was really great when he pitch hit. Well, if you look back at that episode from earlier today, if everyone's healthy and the season started right now with the guys that they have, I don't see how Nick Martini is on the active roster.
Starter looks? Absolutely not. He could push Jose Barrero off the roster, because I liked what Nick Martini did, but I think if we really got to set it up, comparing the two players, I think you still say Barrero still has more upside. You could still get more out of Barrero. I kind of feel like we saw what we saw with Nick Martini, and that's kind of, the best that we could hope for him. And it was a fun story, and maybe he remains in the organization, like, as a AAA guy. You can call him up, you can play first base, you can play the outfield, you can DH, all that other stuff. But I don't necessarily know that he breaks into the opening day roster.
I don't see how he breaks into the roster at all. You talked about him pushing Jose Barrero. I can't see them giving up another right-handed multi-position player to allow for a left-handed outfielder when they're already going to struggle to find left-handed outfielder at bats for Jake Fraley and Will Benson. So I just don't see how you add another left-hander to that mix.
Well, and isn't I'm looking it up right now because I don't want to say something that is incorrect. Okay. For some reason, I thought Jose Barrero was a switch hitter. Was he early on, and then he just dropped that? Anyway, whatever.
He's been a non-hitter. I don't know which side of the plate.
Doesn't matter what side.
But he was not hitting the ball.
No, he wasn't. But I still think, there's still something you could probably glean out of him developmentally. Nick Martini's kind of been a bit of a journeyman, and it was a fun story to see the different things that he was doing for the Reds, but definitely don't think you can expect much more than what he showed the Reds late last season. And we talked about it. This roster is just so full, man, so deep. And Jose Barrero is the only guy I could see him pushing.
All right, let's move this along. Branch Brown checks in. Hey, Branch, how you doing? He says it's hot at the ballpark. You got to stay hydrated. That in response to our posting up for refreshments. You're absolutely right, Branch. It's hot. It's hot down there once you get into the dog days. JRT says Snell. Yeah, Snell to the Reds. We talked about this a little bit earlier today too, and it doesn't hurt to rehash it just for a minute, Jeff, because we were kind of wondering the impact of the Glasnow extension, and what that means for a guy like Snell. And I think it automatically raises his, average value per season by at least $5 million now, because the money that Glasnow got was what the neighborhood we were looking at, and the same neighborhood that Spot Track had Snell at, was where Glasnow landed. I think Snell's the better pitcher. Snell's representation is not going to let him take the same kind of deal. He's going to get more money now. And that probably, I thought it was realistic to have the Snell conversation at the recommendations that like where he landed on Spot Track, where we were looking at him $25 million a season. I don't think that he's going to land there anymore. And I don't think it's realistic to think that the Reds are in that conversation any longer.
I don't even know that it's the average annual value that kicks the Reds out of the conversation. I kind of still had him as a long shot, but I didn't think that it was because of the money. I think it's because of the years. One of the things we didn't talk about with Candelario in the first segment that we've mentioned a couple of different times before, everydayers will know this is something that we've talked about before, is that Candelario's deal, while it is a multi-year deal, still ends before any of the big-time youngsters really hits arbitration. Like Ellie, McLean, all those guys, they don't hit arbitration during the course of Jeimer Candelario's contract. Blake Snell's going to get 5 years minimum. He might get 6, 7, 8 years from a really big market team. That's going to be the biggest problem for the Reds to get a guy like Blake Snell because he's 30. A guy like that for the Reds, you really at most want to give him 4 years, and maybe that fourth year is like an option year or something like that. I don't think that that's going to get it done for him. He's gonna like his agent will probably be like, look, we start at 5 years and then we're going to go higher than that. I don't think the Reds have any problem, and I'll show this graphic because I keep holding on to it just in case we need it, and I feel like it's relevant right now for our YouTube folks. It's the money spent. Now you can add probably about 30 million, I think, between the 3 free agent signings and a couple of other moves that they've had, and then you add in the arbitration players and things like that. Their payroll right now is probably only around 85 million, 90 million, something like that. They could go out and get another guy like that, but I don't necessarily know it's going to be, for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, something like that. That's not going to be what they're looking for.
No, I think you're right. And I don't know where I still land on this starting pitcher thing, Jeff. I mean, I was against it. I said we didn't need it. You spun me around, and now we're kind of back in the camp. Well, what if it doesn't happen? I don't know. This is Grant asks this. Grant says, if the Reds do nothing else this offseason, are you content with the moves they've made? Probably not. We identified 3 areas that we thought should be addressed, right? 3 areas that we really felt needed an upgrade. That was a right-handed bat for the outfield. They didn't do that. That was addressing the bullpen, stabilizing it, making it stronger. I feel like they did that. They went out and made some moves there. And then a spare part for the starting rotation, whether it's a mid-level guy or an ace to lead the things. You were, adamant that they needed to go get somebody. And they have not done that. So for me, they've only done 1 out of the 3 things that we identified that were needed to make this team a true World Series contender, something to really push this team forward. Having only done 1, am I content? No, I don't think that I am.
This is interesting to me because I don't know that it's pass fail. Like, I think there is fail, content, excited, and ecstatic. I think I'm content with the moves that they've made right now, but I wouldn't call myself excited for the moves that they've made right now. Like, I think what they did, like, if you grade their offseason at this moment, I give them like a C+, because there's still moves that should be made. I would like at least 1 more bullpen arm. And if all things being equal, I want another starter, at least a consistent presence in that rotation that you're going to get 25 to 30 starts out of, and they're not going to be, 25 to 30 good starts, not 25 to 30 Luke Weaver starts. I really think that there's still moves to be made, and I think that Nick Krall's not done. Look, there's still plenty of time. We're still talking about 2 months before spring training games even happen. But as of right now, the Reds have not done enough to get me excited.
To your earlier point, the Reds currently are 23rd in Major League Baseball for team payroll at $75,093,333. So there's still plenty of room for them to add and still be well under league average as far as I'm concerned.
Is that counting in like arbitration and stuff like that too?
Yeah, I'm looking at Spot Track right now.
Okay, cool.
League average right now, 125 million. So they're at 70. League average is 125. There is room.
That's why the dollars don't bother me. It's the years that bother me.
So that makes sense to me. Debbie Brown asked a question. It's something we haven't touched on, and it is a real downer. But I do want to talk about this for a second because I think she might be right in this point. Jake Fraley might not play or might be out for a significant period of time in 2024. There was an announcement from the Reds and the Fraley family that one of Jake Fraley's daughters has been diagnosed with cancer. It's a terrible situation. I just lots of prayers for the Fraley family, but this is a valid point that Fraley may be at times unavailable in 2024 as he tends to his family, as he should. So, we don't have any behind the scenes insight to this. I don't know that that's been discussed, but you have to feel like it's on the table if it needs to be. And, I think the Reds will prepare for that. Our Nick Martini conversation earlier, he could be a guy that could fill in a limited role if Fraley needs to have some time away from the team. It's definitely something that we're going to monitor. It's definitely something to pay attention to. And I just truly feel, awful for the Fraley family, and just nothing but the best wishes for them, for their child to have a speedy recovery.
Yeah, I mean, there's some things that are bigger than baseball. So if that's what happens, there's absolutely no problem whatsoever with that. And I think the Reds have the kind of depth, not necessarily to replace him, but to fill in that role and be able to kind of move the roster accordingly. But yeah, that was a bummer to hear.
Carrick Melvin checks in. Carrick, how are you doing, my friend? If I can get my button to work here. Carrick says, add Teoscar Hernandez and call it good. I don't want another pitcher. This is where I started, Carrick. I mean, this is exactly where I was. I'm still on the Teoscar Hernandez bandwagon. It would not hurt my feelings one little bit if they announced that signing today. As far as not going and getting a pitcher, Carrick, I mean, I was right there with you. Jeff and I argued about this on a lot of episodes. If you jump back in the archives, but I've been spun around a little bit, not only by Jeff, but talking with James Rapine, talking with Lance McAllister. You can never have enough pitching. And with the financials looking like they do, go get a guy that's a number one, a number two, but do it. There's no reason to not do it, I think, is really what I'm saying. If they were to go get Teoscar also, I would change my rating of the offseason. If that's all they did, if they made that one more move, I'd be content with what they did this offseason, ready to face opening day and let the starting pitcher chips, land where they land. But I need them to make one more of those two things. We talked about this on our show, and I forget which guest that we had, but it was with a guest. And basically what I said was, we've identified the three things. I need 2 of 3 to consider it a successful offseason. And we haven't done that. And I don't know if it was Mo, I don't know if it was Lance, but I need 2 of 3.
Might have been with Chad, now that I'm thinking about it, because I think we did kind of discuss like what would make this offseason successful. I would love Teoscar Hernandez. So yes, 100% agree on that first part. The not adding a pitcher thing, it still feels like we're betting far too much on guys coming back healthy. And we bet on that last year when it came to Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo and Graham Ashcraft, and they still spent time. Neither one of those guys got 30 starts. I want somebody that can get 30 starts, at least one. And I talked about this the other day, and I got really excited just imagining it. Like if you had multiple guys that got 30 starts on this team with the talent that is in this bullpen, like go on baseballreference.com right now and look at the top 12 WAR guys from last season. 4 of them were bullpen pitchers. And I don't think there's a lot of teams that could say that. Now, you can make the argument there should have been higher WAR from other players and things like that. But still, the bullpen was such a big part of last season because they had to be. I don't want them to have to be. And I feel like if we just go into next year expecting guys to take a step forward, expecting guys to be healthy all the time, we're just doing the same thing that we've always done as the Reds are doing. That they really need to add one more. They had one more starting pitcher. I'll shut up about it because I think that's enough. But I think now
I don't believe I don't believe that's true. Not for a minute. And on that note, for the audio only listeners, that's where we're going to wrap up this edition. The rest of the Q&A will come at you as a bonus episode in your feed a little bit later today. For the video folks here live on YouTube, stay right here. We're going to wrap it up and keep going with your questions and comments. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Reds. Thanks so much for tuning in today for your first and second and probably your third listen when that bonus episode drops. Make sure you are subscribed. Hit us up on Twitter X. Hit us up on the Discord. We want to talk baseball with you. We are going to continue to monitor the rumors and the transactions and pay attention to what's going on out there, gather it all up, and bring it back right here to keep you locked on Reds every single day. All right, let's keep going with these questions and comments. As always, Jeff, the comment section is on fire with great questions and comments. I do want to grab this next one because, boy, would it make my whole day. Here we go. Joshua says, so when are y'all getting Votto on the show? Listen, don't think that we haven't been trying to scheme that all along. My honest answer to you guys for that type of an interview to happen, it's going to be after he's done playing baseball, and then we will pull upon every resource we have to try and make it happen, because that's on my bucket list of guys to get to talk to. We will try and make that happen. It won't happen while he's an active player, especially now that he's a free agent trying to go to a new home. But don't worry, someday we're going to make a full push to try and get Joey on here and relive the Red years and talk hitting and just sit around like we're, kids at Christmas listening to grandpa tell stories. We're going to be all over that, but
could be like a 3-part episode just talking about hitting. Like everything else is just do multiple episodes. But yeah, that would be, that's definitely top of the list right there.
Carrick follows up on his Teoscar Hernandez comment here and says Reds need another right-handed outfielder unless they move Marte to the outfield. I don't necessarily think it has to be Marte. You and I have talked about this, Jeff. I'd be interested to see what everybody watching thinks, but I think, in that lineup earlier today, I put CES out there for reasons, trying to balance the defensive concerns with the offensive concerns to get the bats in. I thought the better defensive alignment was to keep Marte at third, put CES in right, and then let Candelario play first base. I feel like that's the best combination of defense amongst those guys. But I do agree that having one of those guys, whether it's Marte or CES, potentially India, although I don't know about his arm out there, having another one of those infielders learn that outfield position gives them that little missing element of flexibility. There's a lot of flexibility on this lineup, and there's a lot of guys that can move around, but just having one more of those infielders play outfield. And I don't want it to be Matt McClain. Listen, I know when we first brought him up, I talked about the fact that, if you're going to move somebody to the outfield, how about the guy that was an outfielder in college? I know that's where I was. I have changed my mind having seen him play for a full season now. I don't want him moved. I want him at second base or shortstop every day for the rest of his days playing baseball, with a C on his chest as the no. Okay, I'm not going to go there. But,
no, I agree though. I think it's Marte or CES. Like, I'm not strongly feeling one way or the other because it's all kind of hypothetical and speculative at this moment. But I think that if you were to really sit them next to each other, compare them, Marte is going to have more range. I think CES has a little bit more arm strength. You probably want more range simply because Spencer Steer doesn't have very much in left field, and you're asking a lot out of TJ Friedl if you're going to buoy him with two guys that don't have a whole lot of range. But that's like squinting really hard at it. Either one of those guys, to me, really does improve the overall roster feel when you can move Marte or CES, especially against lefties, out in the right field.
Branch Brown says Framber Valdez sure would look nice in a Reds uniform. What do you think, Jeff? Is there a fit? Is it a possibility?
I love Framber. Yeah, I love Framber Valdez quite a bit. He would be the ace immediately. I don't know what he would cost. I know that there were some speculations about trade rumors and stuff, but I think Houston would probably be looking for most, if not all, major league talent in return. And I don't think the Reds are there. I don't know that anyone's going to be there with Houston because I can't see Houston. It doesn't feel like they're ready to enter kind of that period of retooling just yet. And that's where Nick Krall is looking right now. He's looking for teams that are wanting to take prospects for major league players because I don't think he wants to trade anybody off the major league roster, even though Candelario gives them that flexibility. That's why we haven't seen a deal just yet. Cause I remember initially thinking whenever they signed Candelario, they're like, oh man, there's a trade coming almost immediately, like maybe either tonight or tomorrow or something like that. And it's been a few weeks and there ain't been any rumblings about a trade happening outside of the Blue Jays contacting on Jonathan India. But I just think that Nick Krall is really angling for, we've got some prospects to deal from because we have a very deep farm system. Would you take prospects for your pitcher? And if they're saying no to that, then he is saying, well, thanks for your time.
Matthew checks in and says, what about Adam Duvall?
I like him. He'd be a straight platoon guy, but I would like him. That would be the thing, though. Like, if you get a straight platoon guy, then you are.
Yeah. A little bit deeper of a question. If they were to do that, who do they replace on the roster? Barrero, right? So it would be you would have to cut Barrero and be okay with it. So whatever you get, you'd have to consider better than your 26th or your 13th guy in the position group. So I agree. I think that's Barrero, right?
And I think that's going to be the tough part, is that, you know, the big guy, the top prospect from a few years ago, like, are the Reds really at the point where they have an appetite for moving on from both Nick Senzel and Jose Barrero in the same year? Call that pride, call that whatever you will. That's going to be the big question. If you're just going for a platoon guy, like, no doubt about it, you go sign Teoscar Hernandez, see you, Jose. Like, we ain't worried about that. But if you're talking about a straight platoon guy like Adam Duvall, that might be a little bit harder of a, you know, trade, you know, within the Reds roster to make.
Mike Graham weighs in with this. He says, we had Nick Senzel. There was our right-handed bat. That tells me they don't want and or need a right-handed bat. I have a different take on this. I think the Nick Senzel situation was such that they had fractured that relationship so much that there was really no way to keep Nick Senzel in Cincinnati without it becoming a noisy distraction for whatever time remained in that deal. I think that them letting him go was what was best for all parties involved, and that it didn't really reflect what the current roster situation was. I think that was more about the relationship between the player and the team. I don't think that because letting him go, that means they didn't think they needed a right-handed bat. I think that didn't weigh into the thought process at all.
That's the hardest part about, you know, these whole, this is how the roster should move. This is a great strategic move. This is how this player would fit in. What's that player think about it? Because there's still the human side of this equation. And I think Nick Senzel had gotten to the point where he was just like, look, I think I could probably play everywhere. Or I could probably play every day somewhere else. And he was right. I mean, the Nationals have basically come out and said that he's going to be their everyday third baseman. So I think if you were to ask Nick Senzel right now, would you rather be the Reds' right-handed platoon bat, their option for right-handed platoon bat in the outfield, or would you rather be the everyday third baseman on the Nationals? And he's saying, I want to play every day. That's where he's at in his career, because he's not yet proven that he can be, you know, a long tenured major league ball player. He wants to prove that. And that's the opportunity that he now has. I don't think that this is a scenario at all where the Reds said, we are going to, you know, cut off our hand to spite our face here. This is really going to be, you know, something for Nick so that he can further his career.
Craig says, with the fierce competition for starting pitching, can the Reds realistically outbid for a good starting pitcher? Absolutely. We've talked a lot about this as far as the resources they've got. They have the room, and listen, they have the room to do a big deal with a starting pitcher and still cry poor. Again, their current payroll is $75 million roughly. And
which factors in everything, not just like league
average is 100. Right. League average is $125 million. So they're still $50 million below league average. There's room to wiggle there. But Carrick, to your point here, the Reds are 7 deep with pitchers. I would be happy with opening day rotation that looked like Green, Lodolo, Ashcraft, Abbott, Williamson. And then you've got Phillips and Martinez, also a few from Louisville for an emergency. And you know, Chase Petty, Rhett Lauder, they're all in the wings. They're all doing their things. This is where I was, Carrick, and it's hard for me to argue against what you're saying, and those that listen that think the same way. These are the same arguments that I came at Jeff with. But at the end of all of it, I don't want to just sign a starting pitcher to sign a starting pitcher. But if you sign a guy that in this scenario that you've listed, Green, Lodolo, Ashcraft, if you sign a guy that you can look at their statistics and look at their body of work and say, I'm building the rotation, and this guy that I'm signing, I will start in front of Green. I will start in front of Lodolo. I will start in front of Ashcraft. You sign that guy, it makes this team an instant playoff contender, World Series possibility. you make that move. You continually upgrade the team. But if they don't, if that's what they open with, I'm okay. I need them to do something with the outfield though. Then again, I want 2 of 3. But Carrick, I hear you. It's hard for me to argue against what my own argument was when we started this process. But I've come around in as much as saying, you go get me a guy that's going to start 32 games and throw 180, 200 innings, and you look at his stats and he's better than what we project Lodolo to be. He's better than what Ashcraft gave us last season. Then you sign that guy. It's a no-brainer to me. I mean, yeah, it's easy for me to say. I'll spend Bob's money. Cabbage, baby.
Right.
Sell the cabbage.
Right. And I think that's the important part too, is that there are guys out there, and this isn't just a scenario where we're making up this player. I want to throw up this comment again. We're not making up this player that is available. There are plenty of pitchers that are on the free agent market that the Reds could go get, could go spend money on and bring them in right now. And my biggest thing, because yes, they are 7 deep with the potential talent, but who among this list has proved it? Who among this list deserves to be called a bona fide, we're writing you in and pen in the starting rotation right now? You got to be super honest with this too, because I have always stood on the table and said the potential of Hunter Green is to be a multiple Cy Young winner. He has not done that yet. He has not been close to that yet. Nick Lodolo was hurt all year, basically barely pitched last season. Graham Ashcraft missed multiple months with multiple injuries. Andrew Abbott, I was really excited about, and the performance that he put on is amazing, and the things that he has said, we talked about that on earlier episode today, that, you know, he's saying all the right things, and we're really excited to see how he moves forward. But there's not a scout in baseball that will look at 1 year, and not even a full year, of performances and say they know what they know about that guy and call him a dude. They'll call him a potential dude. All of these guys are potential dudes. But to bet on potential and to say that we know what we have based on potential is not satisfying to me. They need one guy that is consistent, that has proven it at the major league level to lead these guys, and not necessarily to be like a clubhouse leader. I don't care about that. They've got plenty of clubhouse personality. They don't need that. They just need a consistent 30-start guy, and there's a couple of those guys out on the market that they can go get.
Jared says Hunter Green is our ace. Hunter Green could be our ace. If you look at all of the players that we have right now, is Hunter Green our ace? I want to start Andrew Abbott on opening day. So, I mean,
it's definitely a conversation because Nick Lodolo had the better 2022, right? Nick Lodolo had a better 2022 than he did. Andrew Abbott had a better 2023 than he did. So there's definitely it's a 3-way conversation for sure to decide who is the best pitcher currently on this roster. I think potential wise, I still say potential he has the most. Andrew Abbott is going to be a solid 2 or 3 guy. Nick Lodolo, solid 2 or 3 guy. Hunter Green is a bona fide number 1 dude if he reaches his potential. He's still got to do some work to do that, though. I'm not comfortable in saying right now, like, because you think about it, and we're comparing these guys with the guys that we currently have. Compare them to other ace pitchers that you've watched. Compare him to Luis Castillo. Is he as good as Luis Castillo was? Because that was our ace. Is he as good as Anthony DeSclafani was? Anthony DeSclafani for a couple of years, whenever our pitching was horrible, was our ace. I think he's right there where DeSclafani is, but to be honest with you, like, is that what's exciting about Hunter Green? No, there's still mountains of potential for him to gain. It's just he's not there right now.
I hear this from Nick. Going into the season without adding quality starting pitching is malpractice. We keep coming back to that pass or fail. Did they do a good job or not?
I don't buy into pass or fail. There's levels. You could fail, but you can also get a C, right?
This issue, and it's the split amongst the listeners on you gotta absolutely have to do it versus the ones that think you don't have to do it. The split sometimes feels 50-50. I just, what's the deal breaker move? Like what's the one thing? Like, if you only get one more move, is it the outfield bat? Is it the starting pitcher? Like, if you only get one more move, to cement this team to be in position to win the Central, which one of the moves do you make?
Steve, only a Sith deals in absolutes.
Oh, stop. Oh my God.
But no, you're right. Like, if you make one more move, I don't know. Like, I think my argument is it's a pitcher, but because I really like where the lineup is, you could make the argument that the talent in the pitching staff, the potential talent in the pitching staff, is quite awesome. And should they reach it this year, this team is going to be amazing. It's just the argument of betting on potential versus betting on what you know. It's really tough, because that's how projection systems work. They project based on what they know. They don't really factor in the whole idea of potential. And then whenever you're putting in a future bet, that's all potential. There's a happy medium there. Like, life is not black and white. I'm tired of this whole pass or fail thing. I'm tired of this whole, like, it's either this or that. Like, there's so many areas of life that there's plenty of gray area to work within. And that's where the Reds are in this offseason. They're working within the gray. I still think they've got a couple moves in them. Is it Teoscar Hernandez and Blake Snell? Probably not. But is it like, maybe is it Teoscar Hernandez and then like a middle of the road starting pitcher that's going to give you 25 to 30 starts or something like that? Possibly. There's still a few guys out there that are like that. Is it going to be Blake Snell and Adam Duvall, or Blake Snell and Michael Taylor? It was something like that. Is probably more to the truth, because our fantasy baseball minds, our MLB The Show minds say, yes, they're going to go get the top at everything. But so, the Yankees think that, the Mets think that, the Mets and the Cubs, who have told their fans for the last 3 months that they have an unlimited budget, and they've all stood up in front of their fans like John Hammond and said, spare no expense. Like, they haven't spent yet. So they're getting ready to do that. Those guys are going after Teoscar Hernandez and Blake Snell as well. So that's going to be the hard part for me. Do the Reds beat those guys in a bidding war? Got to see what that means. But I do think that Nick Krall is going to make the right moves at the end of the day, and he's still got 2 months worth of time to work with.
Let's take a couple more before we get out of here, Jeff. Mike Graham says that we keep saying outfield bat. Are we not okay with Steer, Friedel, and Benson out there every day? I'm not okay.
David Bell's not okay
every day. David Bell's and to be clear, I think you and I are both okay with Steer and Friedel being out there every day. It's that Will Benson part, or Jake Fraley for that matter. And neither one of those guys, I think, has done anything to tell me they're going to figure out the hitting lefty on lefty. And I know, small sample size. You gotta, I hear that you gotta let them do it in order for them to be good at it, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think at this point, if they were going to demonstrate that they could hit lefties well, they would have already demonstrated that they could hit lefties well. I just am not okay going into the season without having a plan to platoon that at least that one outfield position. In
a perfect world, the Reds could give Benson the leeway to hit lefties and still make the playoffs. That going to happen? Is Will Benson playing against left-handed pitchers the reason that the Reds don't make the playoffs? If that's the case, then I don't know. There's some other stuff that went wrong. But that's not the way that Major League Baseball moves anymore. The idea is to mitigate, the weaknesses of your roster. And if you have a guy that can't hit lefties, then you're not going to say, well, we're going to set him out there against lefties until he hits them. That just doesn't happen anymore. Like, you have the guy on your roster that can hit lefties, so that the guy who can't hit lefties sits and then waits for a right-handed relief pitcher to come in. Then you bring him in, and that's when you put him in the best possible scenario. That is not just the Reds. That's not just David Bell and Nick Krall. That's everybody. I mean, the Dodgers, the Orioles. Everybody has so many different lineups that they use. Even the Braves. And the Braves have all the talent in the world. They still platoon some guys. Now, do they platoon Ronald Acuna? No. Is Will Benson Ronald Acuna? No. As much as we would love that to be the case. So I think that, there's a world where he is given the chance to hit lefties, but that world means that the Reds are not in playoff contention. And I'd rather the Reds be in playoff contention.
Let's wrap up with just a little bit of Blake Dunn talk. There's a conversation going in the chat, and I can't grab one of them that kind of sets it all up, but it ends with this. Blake Dunn is better than these guys.
Do we know that?
We don't know that. And the fact of the matter is Blake Dunn has not even reached AAA yet. Is Blake Dunn in the conversation for some point in 2024? Probably, maybe. Here's what I think happens with Blake Dunn. We've kicked around Blake Dunn conversation a couple times this offseason. He's going to go out to Goodyear. He's going to get into some games with the big leaguers early on. No matter what he does, I don't see a scenario where he plays his way onto the opening day roster. I just don't see it. I think he probably starts the season not at AAA, but at AA for a very short stint to kind of get back in the baseball groove. Then they move him to AAA and they see what he does. All-Star break, maybe. September, more likely, if they need him. That's the way I see his season playing out. I think Blake Dunn is a 2025 conversation, is where I'm going with this. We could get a look. Injuries could necessitate moving him along faster, but at the end of the day, I don't think he is a piece that can be relied upon at all for 2024. And really, I don't see him in the conversation.
I think the earliest, and this probably requires there to be some kind of catastrophic meltdown of injuries in the outfield, so I don't even want this to really happen. But the earliest we could probably see him is June, maybe July. And that's with a lot of bad things going wrong with the outfield and them needing to figure out. Think about this. Last year, there were so many different guys that got called up early on in the season between Ellie and Matt McClain, and you had Will Benson get a lot of playing time and all this other stuff. Why was that? There's opportunity. There were bats to be had. They had injuries. They had nobody performing, like things like that. There is no opportunity on this team anymore. The opportunity is to be like a bench guy who comes in off the bench, who's a pinch hit type dude. That's not what we want out of a guy like Blake Dunn. We want him to be able to play every day. So I'm with you. Like, if he's going to play every day, that means that there's been a lot of things that have gone wrong. I don't see him being on this team very much and being a huge impact in 2024. Probably more of a conversation 2025. Could be. Now, is he a reason that they don't consider going for a multi-year deal for a right-handed bat in the outfield? Possibly, but it's not going to be the reason that they don't make a move in the outfield this year. He's not in the plans this year.
Yeah, I think that's right, Jeff. And I think that is probably a good spot to go ahead and wrap it up for the day. We have crossed the 1 hour mark. Thank you guys so much for being here for an Aloha Friday on a Thursday live holiday edition. Listen, happy holidays, folks. Appreciate you guys as this year comes to an end. Without getting into like all of the specifics, you guys, and we'll talk about this a little bit more before the new year turns over. But I just want you guys to know how much we appreciate you all being here and listening and engaging with us. I will tell you that between 2022 and 2023, our audience has more than doubled in size. Yes, and I just cannot thank you all enough. Walking around Cincinnati and you guys stopping us and talking baseball with us and the engagement that we get from you is the reason why we do this and why we love doing it so much. So thank you. You guys all have a tremendous holiday with your families, and we will be back at you next week. Jeff, if you've got any thoughts, and then get us out of here.
Like you said, we love talking baseball with you. That is why we do this. Thanks so much for joining us here on this Aloha Friday on a Thursday. And everybody have a great Christmas, a great holiday. We will talk to you next week.
Have we ever done an episode where you did not work in a stinking Star Wars reference?
Not to my knowledge.